All right, dudes and dudettes, we all have those days where you want to like ball up your project, set it on fire, and then kick it down a hill and roll it into a river, never to be seen again. And then you have days where you fall in love with your project all over again. And this is the latter. Check this out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Between the Sharks. It's a big day. Why is it a big day? Well, if you just said because it's Fender Day, you're darn right it is. All right, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's get you up to speed real quick. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's 600,000 videos on this car because I've been working on it forever. It is a 27 Ford on a stock Model A frame, and I have a set of stock Model A, I think they're the early ones. I think they're 28, 29, but I gotta check again. Coupe fenders that we're going to put on it. So that's full front swoopy fenders, running boards, and then the coupe fenders don't match a touring or truck body even remotely. But they're a pretty nice set of steel fenders, and I have done my due diligence over the time that I've had them to see if I can find a set of touring or truck fenders so I don't have to hack up these lovely, lovely coupe fenders. But hacking it up is probably the way it's gonna go. We originally set this body on the frame trying to center the rear wheel well the best we could figure on the center line of the rear axle, which is gonna go in the rear axle place on the Model A frame, which is basically centered on this rear cross member because the spring is on top of the axle. It runs through here. The wheels will be basically in the center of that. We can move this body anywhere we want, but it'll look funny unless that wheel well is right. So we think it's right. We're going to confirm that. From that point, we worked forward this way. That landed our front end here. Well, at that point we stopped, moved to the radiator, put the radiator in, and then put the engine as close as we could at the height we wanted here, and now we're working back this way again. So that caused us to reverse this firewall. That all fits. That's like the fastest version of where we are that I can get. So where we're going is adding these fenders, checking the fitment, looking at everything again, and we got to start making it real, which is pretty freaking exciting. It's gonna look awesome. Loving it already. So let's review. I mentioned this a lot way back in some video. This is pretty close to stock. The holes are close. Something lining up on the fender is pretty dang close. So what I discussed previously is I don't like how the front wheel's not totally kind of centered in that. However, you know, lower car, big wheel. I move that too far forward, ribbon on it. We'll see. We're doing all those bridges we can do them. And then in the back, one just knocked out to the feeder part when we were holding it up. But this Model A fender, if it rotates forward instead of up, it'll kind of fill this gap a little bit, which pushes this end of the running board forward just a little bit, which makes it line up with the tire just a little bit more like I'd like. So we just we can make all this fit with this really smooth rubber band on. Yeah, hot rodded, baby. It's a lot. If I have to, I guess what we can do is actually pull the fenders out just a little bit. And it throws a little more of the running board because it's good enough. So we're never meant to put it together anyway. So long as you like it, it's going to be all right. Also, my notch for drill shell won't sit down. That notch is running pretty incredible. So, we move the fender forward, or we'll be moving the fender out. It's interesting because if we move the fender out, it won't be centered on the wheel, which is going to be a little weird from the front. I don't know. Well, we're already learning things. So I've got it kind of mocked up, and kind of mocked up. It's real loose, but that doesn't look right. But this time around, I pulled the apron out to kind of meet the fender gap, and we are that many far forward, probably 2 inches further forward than stock Model A. So we can see a few things. The fender apron is out about 1.5 inches further than it would be, sort of tapering away from the front, which is kind of an interesting idea. Maybe we'll use that, I don't know. Then the rear fender is kicked out here because this is a coupe fender. A touring fender would have a cut this way, so it fit tight to the body, but the coupe sat over it. And again, we're dealing with a 27 body and 28, 29 fenders. We are getting, we're about to cross that threshold, which is, there's this blurry line. This is never gonna be a custom, right? It's a hot rod, but now that we're getting into fenders and stuff like that, it's all about the look. So if we pulled the fender off, and we liked how the wheel well sat over the wheel, then we're good. Putting these fenders on it, maybe the whole body needs to come back a little bit, fenders included, possibly even the distance we're off, which is roughly 2 inches, something like that. And we can see how that looks. I was watching AJ's channel, who's supported this channel the whole time, and he was mocking up his body also from a ton of parts. And he ended up being closer than I am back here. So that would, you know, if he's a greater mind than I, and maybe there's room to move this whole body back. That's why everything's kind of loose right now. Because I'm hell-bent on running fenders, I think that we're gonna be okay doing this, and whatever we choose is really just for the looks of the whole thing. But right now, I'm curious, if I just moved everything back, how would that look? Because this is not right. That's okay. I'd rather not move that back actually, but we'll see. It'll be closer to stock if I move it back. There's also two ways. It's like everything else though, there's two ways to fix this. You know, if I move the running board backwards, which is an option, to where it sits stock, which is 1.5 inches that way, that would push that fender back. But if I like the flow of the fenders, why can't I just move the body and the fenders over the wheel? See what I'm saying? Like, more than one way to skin a cat, and how it would have been done is out the window. We've mixed and matched too many parts. This is 100% what we think. Like, that's the fun of building a hot rod. It's what I think is cool that's gonna go, which is pretty neat. And that's the same for your cars. All right, we're gonna just keep tinkering. So I'm not gonna measure this yet, but I'm gonna call that 1 inch and change from that hole to that hole, which is where we were bolted. It was kind of sloppy, but that's still a reference. I'm gonna pull the screws out of the fender and just see if I can tweak it. The running board is kind of where it wants to be. It's interesting because now that I move the body back, we're lined up this way, but because this fender's pushed out, because it's a coupe fender, I got the running board pulled out a little bit, which to me is an acceptable cheat. And I guess, you know, if I tweak all this, what I want to see is what happens if I get this body line closer. This is a solvable problem with some cutting and some welding. And this line is kind of sexy. And then we lose it right here. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of see if there's any happier medium right here. Now there's no reason to believe this should fit Model A coupe fender, Model T touring body. You know what I'm saying? Curious things are happening. So we're back to being lined up on our frame. I can see just enough holes peeking through. I mean, even the headlight bar mount thing, radiator, everything's kind of lined back up. Now, that's not the whole story, because at this point, this weirdness is all based on this fender being kicked out, this using to notch around the rivets that are right there, but you can see we're kind of tapering out. But, I I'm willing to call that a neat little hot rod trick. Like, if I can fill these gaps, which I certainly can if I choose to do that, folks that don't watch this channel, meaning most of the world, is gonna go, how the hell did he do that? What? Why does that work? This is starting to look pretty sharp. All right, so I grabbed my closest thin cardboard and check this out. If I jam this in here, right? And just run it along the fender, we are pretty close. So it's maybe more of the distance thing. So if I make a piece that fills in here, you know, then we're in pretty good shape. If I decide this fender wants to tuck in closer to the tire, I can take a little bit out right here. That would push the entire fender in. It would close this gap, and it would close this gap back here, and it would make our running board slide back under the car. But if we eyeball this way, I don't know how far in we really want to go. You know, this is good. I guess it does kick out the most up here at the top. So it's going to be a combination of things. But for the most part, I do indeed really like what I am seeing. Like a lot. A whole lot. Here's what I'm liking the least, and it's kind of what we just talked about. You can see the entire fender is leaning out a little bit. And to solve that problem, if we trimmed back where it's hitting the most, which is basically from right in here to right back here, the fender would rock in a little bit meaning the amount would cut it. That's a big commitment though, although I think it's the right thing to do. So we're sneaking up on a very critical thing, ladies and gentlemen. When you're completely customizing a car, you gotta get it mocked up, and then you gotta walk the hell away. Like, stare at it for as long as you can, and you gotta walk away, and you gotta come back and look at it again. And the other thing about it is, in a tight garage, this is also really hard. Like, really hard. You wanna get as far away from it as you possibly can. And there is a little trick, like, you can indeed put a mirror on the other side of the room and look back at it. It will seem to double the distance. I got enough room on this side right now, but we'll clear all this stuff out, and then we just gotta, like, I'm cool with this, and I'm actually pretty cool with that. Not 100% sure I'm cool with that. But, once I start cutting this thing, boy howdy, it's gonna be hard to get it to go back together, because we're gonna be cutting it and sort of grinding it to fit. So, will it be fixable? You betcha, it's just metal, but holy smokes, can I screw this up if I am not careful? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna do the smart thing. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna go get some exercise, because gang, we all need it. I'm gonna come back, hopefully with some endorphins and a clearer head, and we are gonna assess. And if this is where it's at, we're gonna start doing some karate, chopping up these fenders and making it fit. Oh, what did we do with the engine? Look at that. Distributor goes right here. I'm a distributor. I'm happy. I like that. I like that a lot. And it got us out of the bell housing a little bit for where our feet go. Like that a lot too. All right. Exercise and then reassess. Man, though. Well, we're back. Still kind of liking it. And, you know, before I remembered to turn the camera on, I started fussing with it. So basically what I did was I kicked this running board and whatchamacallit out a little bit more, kind of getting it more straighter on this plane right here. And I was looking at it, and as usual, I went through every picture I had saved. I've been studying on these things for years. A, I've always loved them. B, I've had this thing for many years. So I've looked at every picture of every one of these I can possibly find, and I was studying on the Model T in the Beach Party movies with Annette Funicello, and, you know, just seeing how that wheel lined up in there, and then Model A, Phaetons, you know, nobody knows how to say that word. Four-door, these things. The fenders do some interesting stuff, you know, but I also was reminded of this Model A street rod anomaly thing that happens kind of regular like, which is the tires kind of pooch out from the fender on a street rod. I'm not sure what it is, if it's the rear end width or whatever, but I'm happy with how the rear end is tucked in toward the body, so, and I'm happy with the size of tire. So basically just, if I can have it my way, I'm gonna keep this edge tucked in, the tire tucked in a little bit from this edge. There are some things in hot rodding and customizing that defy measurement, that you just gotta trust your eyeball on. Even the tiniest movement just changes everything. I mean, all, like that front piece is pretty much staying in place, but all of this is adjustable. So, I mean, man, it's gonna take a lot of eyeballing to be sure it is right. All right, this isn't really like a method, but I needed something to make sure it wasn't all optical illusions, right? We've got compound curves going in every single direction. So I just pulled out a carpenter square, and it's not really designed to do this, but I realized if I put it on 2 points of the tire, right? I can sort of look at the gap at the front of the fender, which, you know, it's roughly about 1/4 of an inch. I can do 2 points on the tire again, you know, trying to hold it basically at the same point on the white wall. Again, this isn't precise, it's just, you know, for eyeballing. I'm at like 1.25 inches. And I can do a similar thing in the back. And roughly 3/4 of an inch. And all that's groovy. It doesn't really tell me anything specifically that I need to do. It does corroborate with the old peepers that this does want to go in a little bit more. Alternatively, both of these could come out, but I think that's burying the wheel in the fender more than I want it to go. I'm gonna cogitate how a guy would mark 1/2 inch for the part that's touching, because it's its own trick. All right, team, so I pulled the door off because that gives me better access, A, for me and for you, to see what's really going on here and the fitment issues. My other kind of like experiment with the carpenter square said it's roughly about 1/2 inch. And then I noticed, look at this, because I've got this thing kind of bolted here, but it doesn't line up here, like it's, you know, slotted down in these bolts so it can twist. But I'll bet, I haven't measured this yet, that's right about 1/2 inch, which means if I can take 1/2 inch out of the part where it just starts touching the other side of the body, take 1/2 inch out all the way to where it touches it again, we should be able to tuck that fender just in enough, close this gap, straighten this line. We'll have more body work to do and more, like, you know, filling of gaps and stuff, but I think that'll get our lines right. All right, pretty simple concept. I drilled a hole in a piece of wood so that the lid is about 1/2 inch in, pretty darn close. Fits the pencil. Let's just make a mark. The wood is keeping it square-ish to the body. It's enough curve of the body. I'm a little bit worried about my pencil not staying totally straight, but we're hot rodding, so it's close enough, I think. See that line right there? All right, I'm gonna make some marks because I'm happy with this. So I need some registration marks that kind of line up real straight here and down on this running board. Best I can get so that if I take this thing off, which I'm gonna have to do, well, then I can put it back on. All right, I got 3 marks. That's about as good as that's gonna get for now. The bolt holes are lined up down yonder. Fender's off. This is the part that gets really nerve-wracking. I mean, I've been looking at this forever but I just moved the body 1.5 inches today. So, I mean, clearly with new information, meaning we actually had the wheels and put the fenders on and it didn't look right, and this looks more better and kind of corroborated by old AJ. Like I said, I'll put a link to his channel. Cool channel, good stuff. Anyway, we've got our mark right here. Remember, that mark is from the body line, so I think we need to go 1/2 inch in from there because the body line is 1/2 inch out from the recess of the wheel well. So we marked off of what we could use and access, but we don't need to take all of that off. So I'm going to transfer that mark with this tape. I've got that ripped to 1/2 inch, be close enough. I'm run it on the inside edge of this pencil line, and then we're going to take a deep breath and maybe make a cut. No guts, no glory. Fred Sanford just hollered at me from the great beyond, and he said, "Don't do that, you big dummy." And I thought, well, why not? And then I realized, remember that time I just dragged the body back 1.5 inches just for giggles or whatever? I didn't center it again after that. Fitting a fender to a body that's hanging off the frame cattywampus is, well, it's not gonna be right. I'm gonna go ahead and measure center line on the frame, get the front centered, get the back centered, and then reevaluate. All right, turns out we were relatively close. And what I mean by relatively close is we were about 1/2 inch off. So you split the difference and whatever. Huge issue with the body, but resolved now. Didn't really change the fender situation all that much. This is an underutilized cutting tool in the world of auto fabrication. I've just got a really tired bimetal blade on there. It's got a lot of teeth per inch, which should bite fine in this. The curve is not great for a nibbler. It's not great for a Ziz, well, a pneumatic Ziz wheel with a small diameter cutting wheel, that'd be all right. I don't want to do it with a grinder, the 4-inch or 4.5 inch cutting wheel. Sawzall, a little too big, so I'm gonna try it with this. If I can get it to bite, it's gonna be the right answer. If I can't, well, then we're gonna get a grinder. Team, that's a pretty clean cut. Definitely way better, gang. I'm not sure if we could go a little bit more or not, or more importantly, if we want to, but we could. I left the tape on there so you guys can see how that ultimately kind of did for us. We tucked in that full 1/2 inch. That's under the body now. This gap closed up, which I guess we could take a fuzz more. I think my inclination at this point is to go ahead and match the other side to this and then take a look at it, move the car out, wander around it, you know, like figure it out. Because right now, she's looking pretty good. There's a me shadow waving at you, but I think we're sneaking up on it. I notched that a little bit. We'll sexy that up before we call it done, but we're notched around the radiator enough. You can see, it's interesting because on the touring cars, this line right here, it comes out at the cowl and then tapers back to basically where there's none of this apron showing. But you can see on the coupes, the body shape of the touring is kind of, the Model T touring is kind of following the body shape of the A coupe, which is kind of interesting. We got to build a little piece here. We got to fill in a little gap here. But the wheel well is centered. The gap from the tire to the fender, I'm happy with it right now. It's very similar to the front fender, which is kind of cool because a lot of times, like I said, you're on big meaty back tires, it gets real street rod looking with the tire pooching out. It's like a guy that's got like too tight a t-shirt and like big old biceps, and it's like, dude, we know you got big old biceps even if you don't wrap them in saran wrap. So like, this gives the tire a little bit room to breathe, and clearly, you know, we got one of the big ones. So I'm gonna repeat this process crammed in that corner over there because I kind of know what I'm doing at this point, kind of. All right, dudes and dudettes, we all have those days where you wanna like ball up your project, set it on fire, and then kick it down a hill and roll it into a river never to be seen again. And then you have days where you fall in love with your project all over again. And this is the latter. Check this out. what can I say? I think the fenders look great. Having one of those moments where I went through, like, you know, the emotions. I found those fenders on actual Craigslist, not Facebook Marketplace, many years ago. And I spent my Saturday driving out, like, to Athens, Georgia, which is quite a trek for me. Met the guy who was, you know, anyway, dragged them home. They've been here ever since, and I thought, man, I bet they'll go on that T. And now they're actually on the T, which is pretty cool. There's a ton of like little fitment to do, but it works. This I'm actually kind of falling for a little bit here. The fact that the entire body now tapers back toward the front of the car in the shape of the Model T. This whole body tapers that way. Now with these kicked out, they kind of taper that way. Otherwise they'd be tucked under in the back here. Anyway, it's one of those things. As always, thanks for watching Between the Sharks. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's a big deal in YouTube land. And good luck on your projects out there. That's gonna go down the road, man. I'm gonna stare at it for a while. We'll see you next time when we do some more doing to it. Doug, what do you think? Approved? All right.